advocates and actually tried to challenge for changing the kind of political leadership we've got in this country so that we do have political leaders who listen to the science, the technology and the people of Australia who want that kind of change. So please welcome Clive Hamilton.
I'll stand, I'll talk from here. First of all, I want to just mention Adam Bant, who regretfully can't be here. Adam is the Greens candidate for this federal seat of Melbourne, and Adam's been campaigning pretty hard on the solar systems issue with a view to sending a message about clean energy and jobs. In this seat of Melbourne, Lindsay Tanner's seat, I think somebody mentioned that the government can find its way to find billions of dollars to bail out the banks when they got into trouble, but they can't find enough money to help solar systems get up and running. Well, as you all know, and as we've heard, this is really a critical moment. We only have a few years, according to leading scientists, in order to bring about the industrial restructuring that will be an essential component of the transition to a low-carbon future. But when we ask ourselves what's happening in this country, in fact, the opposite is happening. There's no sense of urgency. There's no desire politically for radical action. The government's carbon pollution reduction scheme, analysed by both Treasury and Garno, predicts a very healthy expansion of Australia's coal industry for the next several decades. And as we've heard from David, under the CPRS, this was even before it was watered down, Australia's greenhouse gas emissions are not anticipated to begin declining until 2035. Well, it's just astonishing when you read the science to think that any competent or responsible policymaker could delay reducing Australia's greenhouse gas emissions for another 25 years. But of course what we've seen, rather than promote companies which are going to be the innovative energy industries of the 21st century, we've seen the federal government under Howard and now under Rudd invest massive resources in trying to save the coal industry at exactly the time we need to be phasing coal out. And so they've invested huge amounts of mainly public funds in carbon capture and storage. You know, the Australian wool industry levies its members and invests about 2% of its revenue each year in innovation to promote the industry. When you look at how much the coal industry is investing in CCS, it's not anywhere near 2%, it's more like 0.1%. The great bulk of the money going into CCS comes from you and me. And CCS, as you know, carbon capture and storage, or geosequestration as we used to call it, is really a never-never technology. The Treasury suggests that it may be available in the late 2020s or early 2030s. Even its most vigorous advocates concede that it wouldn't start reducing Australia's emissions for 20 or more years. And of course, it's massively expensive. What the coal industry is now, and the electricity industries are now trying to get from the federal government, and they will get it, is for us, the public, to take over responsibility for ensuring the risk of these greenhouse gases which are trapped underground, which have to stay there for hundreds and indeed thousands of years. Because once those greenhouse gases start to leak out of these saline aquifers or whatever underground geological formations, and of course you've undermined the whole purpose of the technology. So rather than take responsibility and pay for the risks associated with this technology, these corporations are insisting, before they go ahead and save us from climate change, that the government, that is the public, provide for the insurance against leaks. And against this extraordinary outlay of public funds on a highly speculative technology that, even if it works, won't start to reduce emissions in this country for 20 or 25 years, we've seen a history for the last 10 years, or 12 years, starting with the Howard government in 1996, of robbing money from research in renewable energy systems. And that's what we're seeing again, unwillingness to sustain the energy industries of the 21st century because we try to keep alive those of the 19th. Of course, support for solar systems would be
much less necessary. If we had a strong and consistent climate change policy in this country, if we had, for example, a genuine emissions reduction strategy based on the science, such as the Greens have under their Safe Climate policy, of cutting Australia's emissions by 40% by 2020. That is, in the next 10 years. But instead of that, we have the pathetic carbon pollution reduction scheme, which promises to cut Australia's emissions by 5%, only on paper though, because as we've seen, Treasury and Garneau analysis shows that our emissions won't be cut at all, at least not for a very long time. Now, of course, all of this controversy, one of the great things about the last 2 weeks is that for the first time the public has been compelled to really try to come to grips with the idea of an emissions trading system. And of course there's a tremendous amount of confusion out there in the public domain about what emissions trading entails. But let me just try, as someone who's worked on this for about 15 years, let me just try and explain that it is actually quite simple to understand if it's explained simply, so let me try. There are three distinct aspects of emissions trading which are sort of sequential that you need to get a grip with. At the moment, there is no legal restriction on polluters to engage in air pollution. There's nothing to stop the owners of Hazelwood from pumping out as much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere as they like. So the first function of an emissions trading system is nothing to do with trading or markets or anything like that. It's simply a piece of legislation that makes it illegal for designated companies to put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere unless they own a permit. You'd be breaking the law if you pollute without owning a permit. So you have to have a permit to emit each tonne of carbon dioxide. So that's the first stage. Quite straightforward. The second stage is to actually, for those companies that are designated polluters under the scheme, to go and acquire these permits from the government. The government issues these permits to pollute. And of course, they should be auctioned. They should go to the highest bidder. And that's what Garneau wanted. That's what Treasury wanted. This is the wonderful thing. On this issue, environmentalists and the economic rationalists are at one. We both want a system where the market signals will work. So polluters have to go and get their permits by buying them, preferably at auction. That's the second stage. The third stage, and this is one that confuses people and gets a lot of attention, is the actual trading of those permits. The legislation would allow anyone, mainly polluters of course, because they're the ones legally required to have them, but anyone, a primary school, you or I, could go to wherever they're traded and buy a carbon pollution permit. If we wanted to, we could go and buy it and just retire it. So that that tonne of carbon dioxide doesn't get emitted. And of course, the key to it, to making it work, is to make sure that the number of permits each year that the government issues is below, substantially below, the number of permits that the polluters are likely to want. And the bigger the gap between the number they want and the number that are actually supplied, the higher will be the price for it. So that's how you impose a price on a tonne of carbon. The problem, of course, is that this scheme opens itself to a whole lot of loopholes and weaknesses and rorts, and that's exactly what the Rudd Labor government has done. First of all, they've imposed a pathetic 5% target, a 5% reduction on current levels by 2020, as against the science, which requires a 40% reduction. Secondly, it allows for so-called offshore compliance. So if Hazelwood wants to pollute more, instead of going and buying more pollution permits from someone who already owns them and paying more, they can go to Papua New Guinea or Indonesia and pay someone not to log a tropical forest.